17th.
Okay, here's 17th, and here's 16th. Yeah, exactly. Those are the two I'm thinking of. Some people might say the 18th, Prohibition. But actually, that would be third on my list, just real quick. And the reason why, not so much because of what it did, but there was good and bad about Prohibition. The good part was that back in that day, they understood that to prohibit something like that required a constitutional amendment, that the federal government did not have the power to do that. Today they don't care, like cigarettes, they just ban, they just make whatever rules they want to, and they don't have the authority to do it. The bad thing about Prohibition, it started the federal government down the road of being a police state, and people got used to that, and now they pretty much are. And so that was really bad. But the two worst amendments, in my opinion, were the 16th and 17th. So let's look at the 16th Amendment first. What did it allow? What did the 16th Amendment do? Income tax. Okay. Income.
It was right after the 15th.
It was right after the 15th. Yeah, there we go. Okay, what did it allow? It actually allowed a direct tax on the people of the United States through income tax. Now, the founders were very leery of a direct tax. So much so that the original Constitution put limits on direct taxation, and that's why they had to pass a constitutional amendment to be able to do an income tax. Let's look at Article 1, Section 8 again. It says, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense of and the general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. And when they say duties, imposts, and duties and imposts and excises, they really those were indirect taxes. So what was a direct tax? A direct tax was a tax on individuals or on property, mainly land, but it could be property like a building or houses or a manufacturing facility or something like that. So they didn't want a direct tax, and so what they did is they inserted another section in Article 1, Section 9. It states, no capitation or other direct tax shall be laid in less in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed directed to be taken by the Constitution. So in other words, a capitation was a direct tax on individuals, and in other words, it's, we're going to tax everybody $10, etc. Every person in the state $10. Or again on any other direct tax like on property. You can see that the direct taxation was limited to the proportion of the census. In other words, what they would do is they'd say, okay, if we're going to tax everybody, it's okay, how many people does the state of Virginia have in proportion to all the other states? So that's their proportion that they should be taxed. So it was, per individual. And guess what? Who collected that tax? It was the states. The states collected the tax and gave it to the federal government when it was apportioned. But the reality was they rarely did a direct tax prior to the 16th Amendment, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And why didn't they like direct taxation? What's so bad about direct taxation? Well, as Chief Justice John Marshall stated in one of his opinions, he said, the power to tax involves the power to destroy. So a federal tax on land or people or whatever, manufacturing could destroy those people or the industries themselves. And they didn't want the federal government to have that power. Additionally, by encouraging indirect taxation, there was a less of a chance of mischief in that the Congress would target specific peoples, groups, or whatever. And so again, they're trying to limit the power of the federal government, limit their mischief. By the way, and this is kind of a side note, since the power to tax is the power to destroy, that's the reason why the church has always been exempt from taxation from our government. And that's from the very beginning, not just since the income tax. The founders followed Ezra 7:24, which says, "We also inform you that it is not allowed to impose tax, tribute, or toll on any of the priests or servants of the house of God." So when church tax exemption was challenged in the 1900s, the Supreme Court gave a ruling, and they said all of the 50 states provide for tax exemption of places of worship, most of them doing so by constitutional guarantees in their state constitutions. Few concepts are more deeply embedded in the fabric of our national life, beginning with pre-revolutionary colonial times. And that's one time the court did get it right lately. So back to the 16th Amendment. What does it say? It says, Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. You know, most of us, we never knew taxes that weren't income taxes. We've had them, you know, for 100 years now. But why is that a bad thing? People don't even think about it anymore. Why is income tax a bad thing? Well, to me, there's several reasons. First, it allowed the federal government to bypass the states in collecting those taxes. Again, they're taxing, getting money directly from you and me, just going directly to the federal government. Previously, as I said, any taxes, even direct taxes, were collected by the states and then given to the federal government. So that if the federal government had any outrageous policies that they were taxing for, it could be mitigated a little bit by the power of the states because they had the money. Okay? Well, today, of course, the federal government reigns supreme regardless of their overreach because they control all the money. They get it directly from us, and that has really severely weakened the power of the states to the point they're almost entirely controlled by the federal government, destroying the principle of balancing powers due to federalism. In other words, the states versus the federal government. Today, what happens is the states get back a small portion of all the taxes we pay in with strings attached, and then we think it's a good thing. Oh, we're getting all this money from the federal government. It's not a good deal. Not at all. In fact, if you think that's a good deal, I've got a deal for you. You give me $100, I'll give you 20 of it back with strings attached. And we're good. And second, it gave the federal government an enormous source of income to fuel all their unconstitutional socialistic programs. For the first 150 years prior to the 16th Amendment, federal revenues and expenditures hovered around 2% of the GDP, gross national product, with the exceptions of during periods of wartime. You know, it went up considerably. But now, what is it? What's our federal revenues?
About 3.5, 4 trillion.
Well, 25% of GDP. Okay, and that's an enormous amount of money. Additionally, the progressive income tax has created a rich versus poor mentality in Americans. The constant refrain that the rich don't pay their fair share is not only untrue, but it creates a constant political divide, which is not good. So that's the 16th. Now, what about the 17th Amendment? It states in part, the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, elected by the people thereof. Well, what's so bad about that? In fact, probably, does anybody even know how senators were elected prior to that?
Yeah,
Okay, by the legislature. You know, I've been training you guys well. You know, most people on the street would have no clue. Well, you know, everybody says, well, that's very democratic. That's a good thing. Well, let's see. As we mentioned, the original method in Article 1, Section 3 says the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, elected by the legislature thereof. Okay, one of the main themes of the Constitution is checks and balances, right? Well, the founders intentionally made the choice of senators different from the way members of the House were chosen, which has always been, the House members have always been chosen by popular election. Why did they do that? So that there would be a balance of what they call sympathies between the two houses. The House would be sympathetic to the people, and the Senate would be sympathetic to the states, providing a good balance between the two. Now, senators really have no allegiance to the states at all, the state legislatures for sure, and generally do what they want to do with little danger of not being reelected. So let's listen to Joseph's story. I've quoted him a lot before. He was a Chief Justice, and he wrote the famous commentaries on the Constitution, as he describes the need for different election process for senators. He says, another and most important advantage arising from this ingredient is the great difference which it creates in the elements of the two branches of the legislature, which constitutes a great desideratum, which basically means something desired, in every practical division of the legislative power. In fact, this division is of little or no intrinsic value unless it is so organized that each can operate as a real check upon undue and rash legislation. If each branch is substantially framed upon the same plan, popular election, like they are today, the advantages of the division are shadowy and imaginative, the visions and speculations of the brain, and not the walking thoughts of statesmen and patriots. In this view, the organization of the Senate becomes of inestimable value. It represents the voice not of a district, but of a state, not of one state, but of all, not of the interest of one state, but of all, not of the chosen pursuits of a predominant population in one state, but of all the pursuits in all the states. So by changing the election process for the Senate, we now don't have a proper balance in Congress. So between the 17th Amendment and the 16th Amendment, it's really destroyed the power of the states totally. Which the states, who was supposed to have more power? The states or the federal government? The states. Because the federal government was given specific, limited, enumerated powers, and everything else belonged to the states or to the people, according to the 10th Amendment. So, big problem with that. And really, that's one more reason the federal government has been able to get away with all the massive overreach that they've had in the last 100 years. Well, by the way, someone already mentioned it, but you know when these two amendments were passed?
1913.
1913. Both of them in 1913, during the Wilson administration, of course, who was a Democrat. It was a very bad year for our republic, I think. Now, if we ever get a convention of states to propose amendments to rein in the power of the federal government from all the massive overreach it does now, the repeal of the 16th and the 17th Amendments would be high on my list of things to do. So, questions or comments? All right, thanks.
Thank you, Ray. I think we all wish that we had raised knowledge of how the government works. Andy Andrew is going to come up and talk to us about a serious issue that's going on at the state level and how you can possibly help him.
Thank you. And just to clarify things, I do know that I'm not supposed to wear my cap at dinner, but I kept it on for a couple of reasons today. One, to keep my head warm, but secondly, to draw your attention to a subject I want to talk to you about. Folks, our leader has gone out on a limb to help us on a subject that is important to all of us, based on the concerns I hear, namely this issue of refugee resettlement, spreading refugees willy-nilly every place out through the country. I have not heard anybody from this crowd who did not feel it was appropriate to bring that under control. Folks, in September, President Trump issued Executive Order 13888 to speak to this issue of refugee resettlement and to bring it under control. A very unusual feature of that executive order is that he gave us the opportunity, he asked for input from, quote, state and local governments. Today, the only voice that is on record representing not just Knox County, not just East Tennessee, but all of Tennessee is your friendly neighbor, Madeline O'Hara, and her DSA City Council. They stole the march, pushed through a resolution at the City Council begging for more refugees. Not only did she do that, she signed a letter with 100 and some mayors from across this nation asking for more refugees into, quote, their areas. How much do you think is going to come into Knoxville without flowing over to Lenore City? Right now, Madam O'Hara is the only voice in our area that anybody hears. We need to work this issue from a couple of levels. The most important is that we need to follow up Jenny's example at the last Loudoun County Commission, putting the pressure on county governors, county mayors, county commissions, the mayor of Greenback. We need our local, our first level government to speak up and let it be known that we want that program stopped. Now, yes, there's a need to pressure the governor, and apparently he's having some trouble coming to the right conclusion. We know for a fact that he is under tremendous pressure from these commercialized church organizations who are making millions of dollars resettling refugees using your tax money. He needs help. The most effective way we can get help on this issue is to get your county mayor, your municipality mayor, your city council, your county commission, to let it be known that we want it stopped. Thank you, and that's about it.
Pretty scary. Sue Gingrich, you're going to go up and say a few words here?
Thank you. Merry Christmas from Patriots Reborn. For political junkies like some of us, it's been a pretty exciting year, but next year is going to be even more exciting. And our organization, it's not really an organization, we're not even a nonprofit, we're a group of concerned citizens that support President Trump. We started as just a little internal Tellico Village organization, and we expanded to now, have other people in it. There's been a lot of emphasis on Loudoun County in particular because, well, it's Loudoun County. And fortunately, for those of us that live in the village, there is now, it's called a Government Affairs Committee, and they're doing some really good work, and they're going to take over a lot of things that I personally and some of us have been doing as far as dealing with county government. So my desire is to be able to concentrate on state and federal issues. If you're not on our mailing list and you would like to be, There's a form out there, or you can give me your card. Early next year, we're going to be changing from what right now is a personal email list that I keep to a group on IO groups. And it'll be much better and a lot less work for me. So thank you. And also, since we're not having a meeting before Christmas, I brought my cheer here. Please stay till the end. That little ticket that you have, you could win one of those prizes, and my goodness, I gathered them all day. And you definitely want to win one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. We also have to recognize our good friend Lowell Russell, who's been a great friend of the state. Before I bring up Marc Hayes, who is a professor for 36 years with more degrees than I've got underwear, 50 years. I want to tell you a quick story about, there was a student who studied ornithology for 4 years. That's the study of birds. And all 4 years he got straight A's. And it was time for his final exam, so he studied all night, he did an all-nighter, and he went into the final exam, and there were 150 students there, and he looked at the exam table, and there was a little handkerchief, and there were 8 bird legs sticking underneath the handkerchief. And the deal was that you had to identify the birds by their legs. Well, this kid stared at those damn legs for about 5 minutes, and he got so mad he took a magic marker and put a big X on his exam sheet, walked up to the professor and slammed the sheet down on the desk. He started walking out of the lecture hall, and the professor says, "Hey son, what's your name?" And the kid pulled his pants up and pulled his socks down and says, "You tell me, professor, we're both up." Anyway, Marc has a PhD, he's a retired lieutenant colonel, he's got all kinds, and he commutes, by the way, from Gatlinburg to West Tennessee.
1,000 miles a week.
1,000 miles a week. And he's going to talk to us about Common Core, which we all love, and sustainable development. Marc?
No, I don't need a microphone. I don't like the echo.
Me neither.
All right, now, the hope for all of this lies with these young ones that I'm looking at. Because 10 years from now, this room will be smaller unless younger people show up. Period. We are surrounded. We've been surrounded for about 4 or 5 decades, but we really didn't come to a true realization of that until about 2008. About 4 decades too late. So this awful machine that has been built doesn't matter who is up at the top. With judges, with federal control of education, federal control of all the money, and so you've got to find out where you have to go in order to complain and have some effect. Now, for education, you really can't go to the governor. It's already been tried, and it was a useless deal from the beginning. And it's not so much that it's his fault, it was Bredesen and the legislature at the time that put into effect the system which basically federalized all education all across the country. And so even if we don't call it Common Core, we call it Tennessee State Standards, it's Common Core. Walks like a duck, you know. That's the way that it works. Okay? Quack, quack. And the whole system is a quack system. And it's not just quacked, it's cracked. Okay? Now, this first speech, our problem is, the way that I see it, it goes back to the Bible. There was a quotation from the Bible. But it goes back, I think, to where there was this argument among the children of Israel. We want a king like everybody else. And so Saul ends up being that king. And life has sucked ever since. Because we were not meant to be governed by kings. God asked, I want to be your king. Please let me do it. And then they kept asking and they kept asking. And what was the answer? Okay. And the first king was a real mess. He starts pursuing the guy who's going to be the next king, David. And it's been a mess ever since. So what we've got is a king system. Worldwide kind of doesn't matter. You know, some are just a little less kingly than others. But ours is becoming a monarchy and has been really starting, I would say, since 1913, because the states have no representation whatsoever. Our 2 senators have no responsibility to Nashville. They pretend to have responsibility to us who put them into office, and especially a la Corker. Okay? They pretend when it's election time. But the whole thing is just a game, and it all goes back to Saul. All of these kings and sub-kings are just as sucky as Saul was. And they don't give a flip, generally speaking. For example, if Governor Bill Lee were here when this first speech was given on the Constitution, I mean, all of us know this stuff. All the answers were coming from the audience, right? If Bill Lee were sitting here, how old is Bill Lee, our governor?
Around 60.
Around 60. Okay, now, how many of you are 70 and above? Raise your hands. Okay, now you see why I mentioned the young guys there, okay? And bring girls with you next time. How many of you are out of the 70s and into the 80s? Okay, now you see where we're headed, and there's only one right now. Uh-oh. So I want to re-emphasize on these 3 guys. Now, what we've got to do is not just learn about and describe what in the Sam Hill is going on, which we all have a pretty good idea about that, don't we? What we've got to find is effective ways to go to the proper Saul that can actually do something and might actually, and then apply the pressure to the degree that the left applies the pressure. It always gets its way until we learn to do that, and apparently they're learning to do that at Turning Point USA with the on the college campuses. They're doers, not just explainers and meters and emailers and talkers. So, speaking of talkers, I guess I should go on. So that's my feeling on that. We've got to be action oriented, and we've got to go to the place where it can be done. And it was mentioned by Andy what has to be done here, because we're kind of giving up on the governor because he didn't come to our speech about, you know, state power and stuff like that at the very first on the Constitution. The governor didn't come to that because even if he had come and it's so obvious what's written, you know, it's kind of like, well, I really don't want to do that. Soros and all of his guys, there's all kinds of skids being greased, and I don't need to mess with the system that's already in place. The Catholics and the Lutherans that are doing this, you know, they've got to fill their coffers because fewer people are coming into the Catholic Church, fewer people are coming into the Lutheran Church, so, you know, I need to, it's always about money, isn't it? Always. Because that was mentioned in the first speech. Money. Money, money, money. And the reason Soros can do what he does is he realized that when he graduated from the London School of Economics in the 1950s. And he's just become more powerful ever since. Talk about a Saul who won't even admit that he's a Jew like Saul would admit it. Or if he does admit that he's a Jew, well, maybe I'm a Jew, but I hate them all. Except for myself, of course. Okay, so let's sort of dive into this, if you'll bear with me. And I don't know whether the sound will work, but I'll make it through, regardless. Now, you notice I'm playing a little joke. How many of you recognize the joke I'm playing there? Okay, you have to be older to realize that. How many of you youngsters recognized it? The three young ones, what I just did. You see at the bottom? What did I just say with this CCP? See, they don't know. Yeah, okay. All right, good. And of course, I had my little Cold War time in Germany in the early 80s under Reagan. Almost 3 years, not quite, right there. So I got to see it. I went through the wall, you know, all legal and everything without the name tag on the uniform, and went into East Berlin. And what I saw in East Berlin, and I have a piece of the wall if I can just find it, one that I chopped out myself. If young people could just see what I saw, I walked down the street in my uniform and I saw Soviet officers and enlisted folks also walking down the street, and there wasn't one human being that made eye contact with me. They looked down at the sidewalk. You go into a shop, a camera shop. In the camera shop were about 5 people who were workers there, and there were only 3 cameras in the whole shop. You know those glass cases? 3 cameras. They got nothing. They had nothing. They had these little plastic cars, Trabants, that ran like chainsaws. That's what they drove. That's what they lived on. And if you've ever seen Other People's Lives, you have to read the subtitles. You can see how those people lived and why they wanted out. Why they wanted out. So, yeah, the Soviet Union. So now I'm legal. So I removed one of the C's and I changed the color. Now we'll see whether the sound works or not. Don't think so. Okay, what this is going to show is the awful tendency that is taking place of everything moving left. And everything evil is on the left. On the right, the extreme right, is just no organization at all. On the left, it doesn't matter whether it's Nazism, fascism, communism, socialism, those are all control freak operations. Some with Marx, some without. And we could add with fascism, Islamofascism, and the reason we could add that is that they operate just like the Nazis. It's a fascistic system, and it's part of the religious system. It's a religious, political, well, you all know this. So you're going to watch this, watch them move across here in just a minute, and this is what's taken place over the last 4 or 5 decades, basically. A movement to the left of the Republicans and the Democrats. So there's nobody towards disorganization. There's everything moving towards the direction of a centralized king. Okay, that's you know, you may have a little Politburo, a little group of guys doing it, but I mean ultimately that's kind of where everything heads into, with Pol Pot in Cambodia, with our little North Korean guy, Rocket Man, and to take this, take Merkel. Okay, her father was a minister, she lived in East Germany, grew up there, and somehow these idiots put her in power. And what's she acting like? the Stasi, the German secret police. I had a German student, and we were talking politics, and he said, "There's nothing you can do." He was speaking of his people. You may speak to the politicians, but there's nothing you can do. We don't take that attitude. It's trying to find the right person to influence Israel. And it's very difficult because we're way behind. This has been going on really since 1913, as was described right here with the first speaker. Now, this is a British accented thing. I'm going to let it run a little while and then I'll move on. But basically, he comes into a classroom, and you're going to see what the classroom's like. There are 3 other students in there, so now he will make 4. And what he is a normal guy with normal expectations. He's going into a mathematics classroom, and somehow they turn this mathematics classroom into a leftist wokeness with everything. So everything has to do with your sexuality or your identification, or you name the leftist thing, somehow that ends up in the classroom. And so what they're doing is they're making a parody of what is happening in classrooms. Now, I really don't think that's happening to the degree that it's happening here in this country there. In other words, there are things that people are really expected to learn, but in our classrooms, the public school classrooms, people are passed along, passed along, passed along. That's the way that it works. And here's the way, the money, so we can't do anything about that. And it's not the principal's fault, it's not the school board's fault, it's not the fault of the superintendent, because they have no power at all. The school board's power is, okay, you get this $5 million here, and the $3 million here, and you've got to use this $2 million over here. That's their deciding power. They don't decide what's learned. That's decided in Washington, D, Communist Corps, or as I call it sometimes, Communist whore. All right, it's awful stuff. It's awful stuff. I mean, I have pictures of worksheets where it shows a young boy playing with his penis and putting a condom on it. It's a worksheet, okay? Now, we may not be doing that in Tennessee. I haven't checked, but it is going on. And so the California of tomorrow is going to be Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. That's the Virginia already is. Okay? Oh no, not gun confiscation, just red flag laws, and we're going to register all the guns. Now, that's awfully close. That's awfully close. And so it is spreading exactly like metastatic cancer. And again, it's these that are going to win it, not us. And we've got to recruit as many of them as we can. But the thing is, we're weak about doing that. They need to recruit themselves. That's the salvation for it all. Because again, in 10 years, what's going to be carrying this on? And we learned, we went to school maybe in the 50s and the 60s, high school and so on. And it was very different then. What was the control mechanism then? Smart aleck teacher and everything. So what was the control mechanism then? The teacher decided everything. And if you crossed the teacher, you went to this back room and you heard whack, whack, whack. And so ADD and ADHD were handled that way. Because we didn't know about it then. But somehow it worked. Somehow it worked. And I don't know, when I finished taking chemistry in high school, I hated it. I made a B in it. And I took that chemistry book and I threw it up into the top of that tree on the school grounds. And for all I know, if the tree is still there, so is the book or parts of it. But it was hard, really hard. I went into an advanced math class during the summer, And I said, no, no, no. I went for about 3 weeks. I want to go regular math. So I dropped out that summer and took, regular algebra 1, algebra 2, that sort of thing, geometry. So I was never a math whiz, but it was difficult, and you didn't get passed along. Didn't happen. And I had Dr. Pace as my civics teacher. That is what has stuck with me all the way from sophomore and junior in high school all the way to today. That stuff doesn't exist anymore. Communism, socialism, the people have no idea of the reality. Look it up on Wikipedia, look it up on, whatever, Britannica, whatever you want to look it up on, and you'll find a very staid and stale definition of what that is, but that doesn't describe what it does. Doesn't even come close. And that's what the students think it is. Oh, let's see, the state ownership of this and that. Oh, okay. Okay, so that didn't go so well in that class. Now, I'm going to try to illustrate what this is like. And what I do with my students is I said, when I'm trying to teach them how to think for themselves rather than just to allow crap to be poured into their heads, but allow them to think, and I tell them not even to believe me, check me out. There's stuff that is above the surface of the water that everybody can see, and that's, why I have the iceberg there. But what is above the water doesn't speak to the truth of the totality of it any more than communism in that definition in Wikipedia or Britannica or wherever you find it speaks of what it really is. What it really is Venezuela, Korea, China. Now, did you notice how we changed the language over the last several years now? When I was in Germany, it was called Red China. Now, somewhere in the 90s, it was called China, right? And everywhere, China. And even Trump, China! Do you remember how he really gets wrought up over that? Okay, so you take those things, those are subtle things where people don't realize what it is. Now Red China's coming back, and instead of calling the enemy liberals, we're now calling them socialists, and some every now and then communists, Marxists. Because that's what they are. That's what they are. Or in some cases fascists, but I haven't ever heard that really used to apply to the people where that applies. In other words, it's just communist without Marx as a philosopher. I'll be my own philosopher, and I'll have my own camps for people. Okay, so we're going to look at the way that the language works here. So below that water is what the truth is. And you learned in school that what, 90% of an iceberg is beneath the water, thus Titanic. And so I'm just going to keep adding things in there. And so what we're saying education is, it's internationally competitive. I'm telling you it's not. What we have is internationally sucky, somewhere in the 30s or 40s on down there, particularly in math and so on. And then the way that we teach reading is so sucky that kids can't read, they can't pronounce things they haven't seen before because they didn't learn to read by using phonetics. They memorize words. See, say. Doesn't work. And how do I know this? I'll see students in their 20s and 30s see totalitarianism, see oligarchy, words that we would know, political kind of words. And they can't pronounce the words. Or they'll stumble over them. And we just go, easy. So they aren't learning how to read. They aren't learning how to do math. They're dumb as a person smoking. they're frying their brains. And it's not their fault, it's not the teacher's fault, it's not the principal's fault, it's not the fault of the school board. We can't do anything there. It has to be done where Wayne Schnell and this group has already done it. Start with Betsy DeVos and give it to the president. Now, we're approaching 90 days of no response. But I think Tim Burchett is working on that. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to see whether I can get Dr. Phil Rowe to work on it also. But that's where the center of gravity is, right there. Because the executive order for education says, get rid of all the crap that's in this that we don't have to have by law, and just do it, like he's doing with environmental things. And like he's trying to do with the Dreamers to eliminate that, and I think he'll eventually win on that, because an executive order lives only as long as it's changed by the next president. But on this one, some stupid court is making it stay. You all familiar with that? Yeah. Okay? Career ready. Bank teller that can't count money. What's the career? Well, on Thursday, the refuse truck comes up and gathers all the stuff from the garbage cans that are protected from the bears where I live. I don't think most of those people would want to call that a career. We have to have it, but you don't go to college for it for sure. College ready. I get them. No, not the case. As a matter of fact, this would be a couple semesters ago. I got accused by one student, it had to be a female student, get the whole thing to remove our power as professors. The design of it was, we are the parent, you are the children sitting there. That's the design, okay, of what college is. But what happened was, in the 1970s, the students became sort of customers, and they rated us. You know how you get those things on your phone, you go to the bank and then, oh, were we okay? Yeah. Was our little green bicycle, did you like it? Regent's Bank? Were they polite to you? Well, they started that on college professors in the 1970s, and it's just progressed, and progress is always regress. And so the power has gone out. It's gone out in high school, grade school, because if so many don't pass there, what do? You lose your job, so you're going to do what it takes. Okay, that's an extra 10. You remember watching that little classroom there? She was giving privilege points to those people toward the end. Well, let's see, you're white, so that's -1. Okay, you're Asian, you know, so on. They went through that silly business. Okay, internationally competitive, not at all. The Chinese can outmath us any day of the world, and so can a whole bunch of other Scandinavians. And we are the ones who put a guy on the... No, that was a Hollywood set, wasn't it? I forgot. Okay, let's see if I can make this thing go. Are you going to go or not? Okay. Initiated by the states. It's called CCSSI. Common Core State Standard Initiative. A lie in the very language itself. No state initiated this. It was a bunch of guys who wanted to get control of the kids and get control of all the money to see what the kids learn. And probably most of you know that on the Islamic thing that takes place in the 7th grade, there was a very hard-working Islamic cleric who got that stuff in there and made sure that the kids, if they were around one, could take, go to the mosque, take off their shoes and pray and do the whole thing. So They can't bring them into a Baptist church, but they can take them in there. They wouldn't take them into a Catholic church, even though the Catholic church brings all of those refugees in. They couldn't take them to a Lutheran church, even though the Lutherans bring all those refugees in. It's mainly those two groups that do that and are making the money off it. Okay, finally, we're realizing that the world is not just green and about icebergs melting and about climate change, but green is red. So I'm going to finish the job here. And let's do one more. Okay, so that's what's above the surface that we're beginning to realize. So let's see what is beneath. Oh, this crazy machine. Next. Okay, there's the common horror right there. And it originates in the United Nations with Robert Mueller, who's still alive and writes commie books. I didn't say comic books. Commie books.
Not the Washington Robert.
He got the system started, and all we did was just keep renaming it, and so we just call it Tennessee State Standards. And even the governor himself, Haslam, admitted that all they did was change the name. So you all probably know that. And for whatever reason, since both parties have moved extreme left, that's why Bill Lee just can't make that decision about, he's not going to make that decision. And I very strongly suspect he will side with Mr. Soros and this is really funny, Mr. Soros and those church groups who want their money. So, this is at the bottom of all of it. Karl Marx. He had no idea when there were only 9 people at his funeral. Of course, he didn't have an idea that even the 9 people would. But think of the power that that man has had. It is worldwide. It is absolutely unreal. It lives on, and it just won't die. We thought we beat it in 1989, but all that happened, according to, let's see, I'm leaving the name right now, but the guy who was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace moved away from it in the 1980s because what happened when the wall fell, moved out of it in the 1980s or early 1990s. When the wall fell, he moved away from Greenpeace, a radical environmental movement that did do some good things, you know, save the whales, stop the nuking, that kind of stuff, nuclear testing in the atmosphere. So he got that done, but then he saw when the wall fell, the ones that took over that environmental movement were the Reds, not the Greens. And they manage it today. And it's very easy to see it straight from New York, that skinny little girl who's been in office now for 1 year from New York. All, let's see, what can we do with that word? AOC. All overly,
Comatose.
all overly communist. We'll do it that way.
Well, if you ask me, Marxism and all of this left-wing agenda is replacing religion.
Oh, there's no question about it. Look, it's replacing religion. It's replacing the family. It's replacing human identity. And that's, you know, these people who want the safe spaces and don't want to be insulted, don't want to be upset. Yeah, yeah. Again, we're using their stupid words. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay, now this is a Cuban here speaking. And so he has, this is about 1 minute and 30 seconds. And basically what he's saying, I have seen this happen before. It is happening here now in the United States. Okay? It is happening here. All right? And he said, you don't even realize it. But one day, it'll be too late, and they will come for you. And there's nothing that you can do about it. Do you see why I'm depending upon these young ones, and you all are too? And the people in Hong Kong are on some sort of time clock. You know that they love freedom because they are flat fighting for it. And look, it's all people their age doing it. They know what it's like on the other side. They know people over there. And they don't want that. They did learn something from British imperialism that they liked. Okay, this is Bill Gates. And you can't see it, but this is on page 2 of an agreement with UNESCO, the Gates Foundation, Microsoft, and there are his initials. His initials are on every page of this. And this is the grab beyond Washington. It's a UN grab above Washington. He's got it covered at both places. How much money did Bill Gates give to Knox County Educate? Was it $10 million to help get this thing going?
Not sure.
I think it was $10 million when we had the communist superintendent here.
Yeah.
So this is big stuff. I'll skip that. Now, this is the identity and family thing. And I don't have all of it here. I mean, I could have had these half-naked guys at a gay pride parade. But I decided to go with this. So this is what's being done at libraries across the nation. Drag queens. It was done. It was done. And I had the pictures, but it wasn't salacious looking enough, the picture, so I decided not to include it. I thought this looked a little more salacious with these guys like this. This is, I think, in New York. Anyway, I got this out of the New York Times. But Cookeville did the same thing, did the same sort of thing. And there was a big uproar about it. But of course, they did it, and it was just too late. Okay, and then here is Epstein, Weinstein, and the woman who brings in all the little girls for the men to bang on. Okay?
Maxwell?
And they were at a Christmas, I forgot, that may be her name. And they were at a Christmas party for Prince Andrew where this picture was taken. So you can see the pedo stuff, the pedo and rape stuff. The rape has kind of been normalized in a way. This has taken over women's sports. When you become that, I guess. When you do the Bruce Jenner thing. Sorry, Caitlin. All right, so with this, in 10 years, believe me, this is going to be Thailand, where none of that draws any problems. Pedophilia.
They try to normalize all of it.
Yeah, exactly right. It's exactly what's going on. And it's being normalized where? In the schools and in the culture which contains the entertainment with this crap in it. Skip that. because the sound was fairly essential to it. So I end where I started. Let's find a way to increase what we're doing, finding the right places. Bill Lee, with the resettlement thing, I think we all suspect the worst. I mean, I'm not seeing much different in him from Haslam, the way that he operates. So what do we have next? It's exactly what you talked about. And look, this is altogether possible. Think of what they're doing in Virginia with these sanctuary counties to try to protect their Second Amendment rights. And so, because of money and power, these guys are taking over everything. And if you consider the number of federal employees and of state employees, all of whom are beholden to the Democratic Party in the state of Virginia, Virginia is toast. And if and when it actually does happen in Texas, the whole country is toast. And I don't know how you ever get back from it. So we have to pound, and we have to recruit, and we have to ask these young guys to recruit, and to do not just what they're doing on campus, which is where they live, but let's find a way for them to march on Washington, okay? Not just a bunch of people with nose rings and tattoos up and down their neck and across their face. Nice clean-cut guys and good-looking young ladies to go with them. That's what we gotta do. That's the job. Okay? Any questions? Thank you much for
I'm going to pass the microphone around if you have any questions.
I'm probably loud enough, Mark, and just to add to this, and I try so hard not to be a pessimist about this, but it's very difficult not to be a pessimist, because all of this is going on, and it is probably going on here in Tennessee, but we're so busy with our lives, we just don't pay attention. Even as much as Bobby and I do, and as much as we're involved in all of this, and how we've been fighting our school board here in Loudoun County for several years now, especially on the 7th grade Islam issue. Of course, they told us to sit down and shut up. That's how they feel about it.
Right.
So you know, it's like a deer in the headlights. They don't even know what's going on. But another issue I found out about just about a month ago, and I was just even further discouraged. We have a daughter who teaches in a Christian academy. Now, we've all been told that, you know, private schools, Christian schools, all that, don't have to teach Common Core and all that kind of thing. Well, that's not true. They've said even this ESA program that Bill Lee is so hyped up over and everything, giving people money to go to other schools.
I've got to say something here.
Go ahead.
For a second. The Commissioner for Education is about a 32-year-old woman
Yes.
who came from Texas. She does not know Jack. I remember listening to her when she was speaking. Now, she's a total leftist. She's from California, born there.
Right.
Okay, so she goes to Texas, and she comes and speaks to this group of us. We were in Lebanon, Tennessee.
Yes.
And she comes in there with her daughter and her mom, and what she says, she said, well, when I was a principal, and the woman isn't beyond 32 years old. She's going bing, 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 bing.
Exactly.
She's a climber, and she wants to ride the wave. She doesn't want to govern the wave.
Exactly. And that's Peggy Schlien.
Yes.
Is her name. And of course she was technically run out of Texas because she was so bad, had to pay someone else $250,000 because of issues and that kind of thing, yeah. But the thing that I found out, and like I said, we have one of our daughters is a teacher at a Christian academy. Several weeks ago, someone posted on social media, oh, my daughter has this problem in school, and it was a math problem, you know, what we used to call written problems when we were kids. Yeah. And she said, can somebody help me figure this out, because I can't help her, you know. And I thought, well, why is she asking all these people who go to public school and hear Common Core math every day of the week? Well, I found out why, and it wasn't good news. Now that Pearson, who is, you know, using all the stuff from Qatar and Saudi Arabia and everything, supplying all our books to all the kids, they have so invaded our textbook stuff here in this country that now you can't get textbooks that are not Common Core. So yeah, the Christian schools, the private schools, everything else, they all have to teach Common Core because they can't get a book that teaches anything else.
And history's going to be New York Times 1619
Yes.
project. That's what
Yes.
history's going to be throughout school. And so what that says is racism is in your DNA. In other words, there's nothing you can do about it. So you,
Only if you're white though.
well, yeah, exactly.
Any other questions? You have been wonderful. That's his, we'd love to have you back. Oh, wait a minute, we have, here we go.
Well, I don't have a question, but I represent the 21st District for the House, and I just want to stop by and tell you how important across the County Patriots is to me, but more importantly, how much I appreciate each one of y'all. And I want to stop by and wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you for all you do for us too. We appreciate it. Any more questions?
Over here with John.
I enjoyed what you had to say very much.
Thank you.
However, I don't mean to be a cynic and hopeless and helpless, but I completely agree with you. We've got young ones here. This group, excuse me, was formed because we got pissed off at Obama in 2008. This group, this age group here, were at the right point at that time, and with the background this group has had of pulling itself up by its own bootstraps, Obama just brushed the hair of the dog the wrong way. And people who didn't care about politics or left it for somebody else got off their butts and did something. To the point of my question and my pessimism. With the current generation of kids expecting their moms, their dads, the helicopter parents, what can we do? What can we say to get more kids involved? Now, I would hate to see we elect Obama again and get them, but if they did, I don't think they would get pissed off, and I don't think they would do anything about it. I feel helpless and hopeless as to what we can do to get these kids involved. Now, you see these people coming in every day, and you have to deal with them. How do you put up with it?
Well, I'm very fortunate, and the reason I'm doing this into my old age is because of them. I get to change some minds. I get the opportunity to teach them to think in ways that they have not thought before. There was, in Ripley, Tennessee, this is maybe 50 miles from Memphis. It's one of the UT Martin centers. I had 14 students in this class. And there was this huge black guy who played football. And I noticed that he smiled a lot, he was quiet. But at the end, after he already had his grade and knew what it was, he said, you know, I've been brainwashed, and I didn't even know it till I listened to you. So I give them an opportunity to hear things that they do not hear. Here's another example that I can remember just from this semester. There were these kids who were in their biology professor's class, and we'd already gone through the global warming and green. See, any subject for public speaking is my subject. It's their subject. Any subject is fine. And so I concentrate on these things that they do not know, or these things that they think they know, but they don't really. And one of the things that they think they do know is we've got to save the planet. Okay? We've got to save the planet, and Green New Deal and that sort of thing. And all their teachers, you know, spout that stuff. So after they'd already been through that with me and had watched something that they'd never seen, and we talk about it, watch something that they'd never seen, what they did was in the biology class, the biology teacher was saving the planet in front of them. And the 4 or 5 of my students who were in that class, in addition to mine, started laughing. And he got ticked off. What are you laughing about? And they wouldn't tell him. But I had an effect. And so I've been doing this ever since the Obama years. This would go back about 7 years. I decided that I can choose subject matter to expose them to, and expose them to sides that they are never exposed to on purpose, not exposed to it. And I will show Islamic things as well. I'll do that. And so I just have to be careful and do it slowly. And so that's the reason that I got a complaint from one student who said that all I talked about was communism. I think you can probably see what she'd say. And I think he may be, you know, anti-woman. And I thought, that's really funny. Let's see, I have a mother, a sister, 5 grandchildren who are girls. I've always loved girls. So she, you know, I had no effect on her. And I imagine I have little to no effect on some. But I think that in general, I might have a pretty good effect on 15 to 25% in a class. And so I want to keep doing that as long as I can do it, because that way it meets my talents and I'm doing what I can do. So in answer to your question, I think we can probably do very little about recruiting them into us old folks, but I think that they can, or even if they form their own groups, like on a campus, for example, with Turning Point USA, for example, we're going to have to depend upon them. Because when Obama came in, we were all younger, and then in the next 10 years, a bunch of us aren't going to be here, right? So it is absolutely up to them. And I'm glad Turning Point USA got started when it did, because that gives them hope.
We'll take one more question and shut her down.
I don't need the mic. Here you go. Thank y'all. As someone who's 23, I just graduated college with my master's degree from Tennessee. And Aaron, you're a senior in college. I want to let y'all know that this stuff is very real, and it's very happening. I faced it just this last semester in one of my classes. My research, I wanted to only put gender, male and female. And the whole class turned against me, and we broke into a huge argument. The teacher put a video up of the gender unicorn on YouTube, and she made me watch it to enlighten me. So I'll let you know, but there's hope. Turning Point USA, we have a whole bunch of groups on campus, and this stuff is only lighting a fire with young people in this Knoxville area. It's huge.
Yay.
I'm the field director for Bill Haggerty for Senate, a guy who believes in the Constitution, and our campaign right now is actively working with these groups and college students to transform the way college students and young people below 40 or 50 view politics and they view the world. They need to see this revelation of what is changing. And I'm proud to represent Bill Haggerty, who is someone who's fired up, and that's something that he is wanting to personally have involved, is having young people recognize the issues that's happening and the necessary steps that we need to take as a society, especially people of my generation, that realize, hey, this stuff is being fed to us, and we need to realize it. And so, yeah, I'm proud to represent Bill Haggerty and our campaign.
Thank you. And to wrap this up, the brilliant Lowell Thomas once said, the next time an academician tells you we need more diversity, Ask them how many conservatives are in their sociology department. Susan, well, why don't you take care of it?
I just wanted to add that I, as a born-again Christian, I'm not worried about it because I know who's in charge. And I belong to a church, a big church that's growing with a pastor who is not politically correct, that clarifies everything for us every single Sunday. And his preaching is inspiring a lot of people going to that church, a lot of children. And I think our future, he's in control. He gave us Obama for a reason. He gave us Trump for a reason. And I think that either, I'm not worried one way or another because I know where I'm going. Okay, anyway, enough seriousness. This is fun time. As I said, I kind of worked all day and gathered these little prizes from around my house. And we're going to draw. Does everybody have a ticket? Here's the way it's going to work. And Jenny, can you help me?
Sure.
Bring your ticket, just in case you win.
Very little bad. Please email your mayor, Bradshaw, about the refugee thing. The letter is due ASAP to the president, but we've got to get on it.
Okay. Where's the back? Oh, okay. All right. Jenny, probably could use. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna come here, Carolyn. You can help too. I'm gonna draw a ticket. If it's your ticket, put your hand up. Just we're gonna pick any prize, and there's a little clue in here, and I'm gonna read the clue. You get the prize. You can open it. Whoever wants to see it can see it. Okay. First number. The last, I guess we can start, well, I don't know.
Last four.
Well, but we have different numbers in here. 701360. The clue is Christmas stressing you out. Is that your ticket?
No. Oh, was it 701360?
Yes.
Oh, it's my ticket.
Okay, there you go.
All right.
There you go.
It's a new math, huh?
Yeah.
Where is the thing?
The number is 5343767.
It's okay to be different.
Oh my gosh, that's my number.
Okay, next one.
Next number is 701357.
Have room for one more.
701357.
Nobody left. They're not that bad a prize. Okay, let's go again.
Oh, all right, that was me.
So you were right.
I was looking for a lady.
How's that,
I was looking at my thing.
how's that common core math working for you?
Okay, the next number is 5343765.
Such a scare and still here.
All right, stand guard.
Well, I had 6-6, she had 6-7.
Next number is 534 3774.
There you go. Come on up.
Oh, no, she may be back.
Okay, 5343790.
Five, this is one of the earlier. 5343780.
Hey, here's the list, the Constitution.
Do we really know him now?
Okay, 5343784.
Want to think like Trump?
Okay, the next number is spelled. Okay, it's 5343769.
Were you naughty?
You said 769?
769. Yes.
Okay.
Andy.
Yeah, Andy, you have to open this so everybody can see it from Victoria's Secret's page. Yeah, people can see it.
Yeah, let's see what y'all got.
Where are you at?
Open your bag. Next number. What is it?
You're on Santa's list?
Santa's list.
Yeah.
Comes in handy.
Not his good list.
He's a militarian.
It's a root canal.
Next number is 534370. I'm sorry. Sorry. 7. No. Start over again. 5343781. Oh.
An oldie but goodie. One more left.
Drum roll. 5343766.
We got a winner.
A spare because we care.
I got a PSA.
You gotta open that so they can see what it is.
Okay. Tickle all the way.
Here's a PSA. For those of you who have ever seen Last Man Standing, January 2nd is a Thursday night. It used to be on Fridays. January 2nd, I'm guessing 8 o'clock. Last Man Standing.
Which season?
On Fox. Fox broadcast.
But they're changing dates.
No, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sister. Okay, that's a wrap. Does anybody know who the speaker is for next month? Because I don't.
Is there a meeting in January?
Yes.
Yes, there is. Who is it?
Dr. Manny Sethi, running for senator.
Okay, Dr. Manny Sethi, running for...
He'll be our January speaker.
All
Our
right.
February speaker will be the Asian carp expert. The
Asian silver.
the March speaker will be, I don't want to say his
That's all right.
name.
We'll take it 1 month at a time at our age. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So, because UT has
As
I'm not going.